Jeff Paterson of Rink Wide, Vancouver, is our Canucks reporter. He joins after a 2-1 victory over the Arizona Coyotes. Jeff, is all well with the Canucks after a narrow win against a team like that?
Just forget about everything else.
Mm-hmm. I felt an awful lot like the Anaheim game on Sunday. A win's a win, and those 2 points mean as much as the 10-1 romp over San Jose early in the season. But we're getting down to crunch time here, and every game is an opportunity for this team to sort of shake out of its offensive funk, and that hasn't happened. And so all these narrow wins against non-playoff teams, again, you take the 2 points and you move on and you hope your next game is better. But no, I mean, there are still concerns here. There's 6 games to go. You heard the coach imploring a handful of his players to start to dig in and play like it's the playoffs now, because Rick Tocchet knows he can't flip a switch. So tougher tests ahead, starting on Saturday in Los Angeles, and then the return game with Vegas here at home next Monday night, and of course the game going into Edmonton. And we'll see what that means. I mean, what a night on the out-of-town scoreboard for the Vancouver Canucks, with Dallas doing a number on the Oilers. So it was a good night for the Vancouver Canucks, some great individual performances, but collectively, yeah, there's still some red flags around this hockey club.
Well, let me ask this, because we spent an awful lot of time talking power play here of late, maybe since the All-Star break, and what isn't working. 3 straight games with the power play goal. Are we feeling better? Do we see the seeds or the beginnings of a fix here for the power play?
I'll say that the sliver of light there is the way the goals have been scored. Brock Besser against Anaheim was sort of that Brock Besser power play goal on the doorstep in the blue paint, bangs in a loose puck. That was good. They got a puck through to the net, and then Besser was able to make something happen. In Vegas, Elias Pettersson's the guy standing right on the edge of the blue paint, a terrific screen. You know, it's not about the strength of the shot. It's about, does that shot get through the layers of defense? And they got one through in Vegas. And then last night, you know, Connor Garland, not the biggest guy in the world, obviously, but willing to go to the tough area, stand his ground there. And Quinn Hughes just kind of flings that puck. So I like the fact that pucks are being funneled to the front of the net. That's something that was lacking, way too much perimeter play. And again, I think it underscores, doesn't have to be the big one-time blast. It doesn't have to be Elias Pettersson with the elite one-timer, although I'd kind of like to see that come back from time to time as a weapon. But I do like the fact that the Canucks seem to be taking the message to heart of get some pucks to the net, and then some good things can happen.
And yet one power play in which they don't get into the zone at all. not at all. So, you know, like when I want to see a game, I would rather a game at this point where they go 0 for 3, but they are zipping the puck around and pelting the goalie and don't even score, rather than getting a goal and the other 2 or 3 times they can't even enter the zone, Jeff, because then the goal just seems lucky at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I were going back and forth on social. That first one was dreadful. Like, one shot on goal, and I think it came late in the first power play. And you're right, you can't get pucks to the net if you can't gain the zone and set up. And look, they're going to face better opponents than the Arizona Coyotes once the playoffs arrive. Like, the Los Angeles Kings are the best penalty-killing team in the National Hockey League, or at least they go back and forth with Carolina on any given day. And if that's a first-round opponent, like, not only do you need your power play going, but then the matchup is, oh, you've drawn one of the top penalty killers in the National Hockey League, and that just tells you, you know, that's your first-round opponent. So it's not just a one-off. That's going to be the entire series, and they're going to have to find a way to break down a penalty kill like the Los Angeles Kings if they run into them, and certainly they're going to get a taste of it on Saturday night. So you're right. There are still lots of areas for improvement. They're still trying to figure out who's going to be the fifth guy on that power play with the big four. You know what's interesting, though, guys, is and Quinn Hughes has scored a couple of power play goals here, doubled his season total in the last couple of games. I was looking at this just to see where his point production stood with the man advantage. And I sort of forgot how good he was and that power play was early in the season. Quinn had 15 power play points in the first 22 games of the season.
Wow.
He has 19 in the 54 games since then. And since the All-Star break, only 11 power play points in 27 games. So a lot of numbers there, but you can see that, you know, his production at 5-on-4 has been in decline, and I think it goes hand in hand with the struggles of the power play. But, you know, it's not like he's going to get to 90 points absolutely feasting with the man advantage. In fact, his lead atop the NHL scoring among all defenders is bigger at even strength than it is overall. Like, he's got a 5-point lead on Cale Makar, but it's 6 over Josh Morrissey in terms of even strength points on the season. So it hasn't just been about Quinn Hughes and this incredible power play racking up the points. He's been doing a lot of his damage, obviously, over the bulk of the season at even strength.
I think he's figured out to move. Like he was moving on the power play. He was the instigator to move on the power play. And that's ultimately where those chances and the goals came from.
Speaking of Hughes, you think he's going to win the Norris? I think that's wrapped up now.
I think these last two nights, like, even in Vegas, like the team was a disaster, and yet I think he was on the ice. He was on the ice for the first goal against, but after that, it wasn't on his watch necessarily. And he scores too, and he's trying to help his team claw its way back. And then last night, a masterclass, certainly the shift that led to the Connor Garland goal. The Coyotes just couldn't touch him. I've watched it a few times since I saw it in real time, and it's a spectacular shift in a season that has been full of them. And, that's at the tail end of back-to-back nights where he's logging big minutes and the motor is still going. And the Coyotes, they were chasing, and ultimately Quinn Hughes, the shot goes wide, and man, there were a lot of bounces off the end boards at the mullet, but that bounce worked out well with Connor Garland swooping in there and scoring against his former team to put the dagger in. So, they pull one out much as they did against Anaheim on Sunday, where they needed a late goal. They get it. But again, I think that they recognize that these types of efforts, and look, territorially, they dominated. Like, they dominated everywhere but on the scoreboard against Arizona. But that kind of brings us back to this idea that, the Coyotes should never have been hanging around in that hockey game in that second period that was so one-sided. The Canucks had to find a way to stretch their lead.
So we'll take that as a yes on the Norris. Does that make him the team MVP?
He's been my MVP all season long. As great a season as JT Miller has had, I just think the special things that Quinn Hughes has done from the outset, leveled up, taken on the responsibility of being captain, and taken his game to another level. And, in the process, just continues to rewrite the Canucks record book, now into solo second all-time, only Alex Edler ahead of him. And Quinn Hughes is one more big season away from being the top dog all-time among Canuck defenders. And he's going to get there at the age of 25, which is staggering in some ways, because you're thinking about it. If he can be a career Canuck, he could have a full decade of seasons beyond, like, past Edler, and still have 10 really good productive years. Like, in my world now, I'm starting to think there is a way someday, years down the road, we're going to look at Canucks defensemen scoring in the history books, and Quinn Hughes will be at like 1,000 points, and second place will be 409 of Alex Edler. Like, I can see something like that happening. Like, it's just the rate at which he is scoring, the consistency. I think he's been the MVP. Just the way he tilts the ice almost every night out. There have been so few bad nights and even bad shifts for Quinn Hughes. I just think start to finish, he has been the most valuable player for this hockey club.
Saw your tweet with the quote on the post-game report, him saying it's serious hockey. I mean, I love it. I mean, we were kind of lamenting this yesterday. Like, can somebody please just look like this is a different part of the schedule? Like, it just doesn't seem like anybody knows where they are in the schedule outside of Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, and that came after the comments of Rick Tocchet post-game in Vegas. And then, that's some message sending. I just don't see any other way when you're scratching Pia Suter, who, is in a rut, but still does other things to help this hockey club. Guy's been on the first unit power play. I know that hasn't been a successful experiment, but I do think when they line up, Pia Suter is certainly one of their 9 or 10 best forwards. And so to pull him out of the lineup entirely, I felt like was message sending. And you're right, the message doesn't, like, the urgency with which so many of these guys. Connor Garland's been playing with the urgency for a while. Quinn Hughes, Dakota Joshua has been pretty good coming back. And JT, the motor's always running. But, I think the list kind of stops around there. And, so much focus on Elias Paterson. I get that. But the same goes for Brock Besser and Suter when he's in the lineup. And there are others. And you see a second period like that last night, guys, where Mikheyev has the partial breakaway. No finish. Teddy Bluger at the side of the net set up by Mikheyev. No finish whatsoever. Podkolzin, bull rush to the front of the net. That's great. Should have been a penalty on the play, but still no finish there. And you're just wondering at some point, like, and I know it's just like one goal. Like, does one goal get Pia Suter out of his slump when he gets back in the lineup? No, it doesn't. But you want some of these guys to be feeling a little bit better about their game this close to playoff time. So, again, I go back to the second period. That game shouldn't have been close. And unfortunately, the Canucks right now seem to have this knack of letting teams hang around. But in the end, more often than not, they're able to pull out the victories.
What did you make of Archer's Silovs?
Yeah, how can you not be impressed? Like, back-to-back were low scoring game. The margins were fine. I mean, for the first half of the game, it's scoreless and an Arizona goal, and who knows where that game goes from there. So, the only goal he gives up, bang play, the power play. We saw a goal like that from Jamie Benn last week in Vancouver. It turned out to be the game winner when the Stars were in town. This one tied the game, but something for the Canucks in front of their goaltenders to be mindful of is, can they tighten up a little bit on the penalty kill? But Artur Silovs had to make some saves. Certainly in the first 40 minutes, I think it's the mental challenge of staying in the game. But that pad save that he makes off Kesselring late in the second, where he has to come quite a distance from his right to his left, that was a spectacular save that preserves the 1-0 lead. And then early in the third period, we started to see the Coyotes use some speed, drive wide, cut hard to the net a couple of times. Those pucks can find their way in. Clayton Keller tried to surprise him from a pretty sharp angle on the power play when he tried to slip it under Artur Silovs, and I think he got close to the goal line, but Silovs was able to make the save there. So, he looks confident in the net. He's 2-0. I know he hasn't faced the best teams in the National Hockey League, and it'll be interesting to see if there is another start for him here. But I thought pretty high praise from Rick Tocchet after the game when he talked about he looks like Thatcher Demko in there just in terms of his calm demeanor and his composure for a guy that has only seen NHL shooters twice now all season long.
He hasn't had a save percentage below 907 in over 3 years at any level. He's 5-2 now, career in the NHL with a 913 save percentage, and he's 23 years of age. I mean, that's development. Like that's a kid that's developing.
So to me, the big question is he now the backup next year? Like, do you feel good about moving on from Casey DeSmith and not having to pay that position? And you're going to go forward with Artur Silovs as your backup goalie. Thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, at this time last year, we thought that he was in consideration, and then obviously, and Patrick Allvin said he would be comfortable if that was the case, and then obviously they went out and they got made the DeSmith trade at the start of the season. I think for a team, and I know the cap's going up, but so are the salaries for Paterson and Hronek and Dakota Joshua. Every penny is going to matter for the Vancouver Canucks. And if there is a way that they can save a little bit with a guy that is going to be under contract at a team-friendly price, Silovs needs a new deal, but he's got no leverage. So, it's still going to be a relatively low, maybe give him a couple of years of security and keep the dollars down. Whatever the case, yeah. And I think also there has to be some learnings on the part of the organization here that Thatcher Demko simply cannot push 60 games in a season. And so, part of me would say, hey, at 23, do you want a young guy sitting on the bench, not playing very much? But I think that we will see moving forward here that Demko's start rate will diminish, and that should mean more starts for whoever the backup is. But if that's Silovs, maybe you're looking at more of a 50-32 kind of split to keep Thatcher Demko as fresh and ready as possible for the playoffs so that he can get through a National Hockey League regular season, which is something that he hasn't been able to do as an NHL starter. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's there for Silovs. We'll see where it goes for the organization, but absolutely, I can see a path where he has graduated from the American Hockey League after this season to be a full-time National Hockey League.
Demko played 64 games a couple of years ago, but do we have to call him injury-riddled? Is he an injury-riddled goalie? Is that Demko's label right now, given his history?
I mean, I think it has to be noted that he has not been able to get through an NHL season without injury. And this is 3 years now that there's been a significant knock to him that's kept him out of action for a while. And of course, the one 2 years ago after the heavy workload, they shut him down at the end of the season. Last year was gone for the middle 3 months. And here, it's going to turn into at least a full month for Thatcher Demko. It's promising that he's back on the ice, and we'll see. It's an off day for the Canucks today, and they'll have a practice, see how involved. It's one thing to come out at the end of a morning skate in Vegas and just take pucks from Ian Clark. Can he ramp it up? Will he be a participant in practice? There was a suggestion. I think Irf made the suggestion on your show yesterday that, maybe Monday against Vegas. That still seems premature to me. I wonder about the Arizona game next week, just as a low event game, maybe to sort of ease a starting goaltender back in, especially if you hope to have him for the Edmonton game at the end of that week. So who knows, moving targets there, but I'm curious to see how involved Thatcher Demko is going to be at the Friday practice at the Kings facility in El Segundo, and maybe we'll get a better read then on his readiness and go from there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's not an unfair label at this point. Now, goaltenders, so many moving parts. We still don't know ultimately what caused this latest injury for Thatcher Demko. But at some point for him to sort of shed that label, he's going to have to be available to the Vancouver Canucks, all season long, and that's just something that hasn't been there in his game in each of the last 3 seasons.
Did we talk Ian Cole with you a couple earlier in the week? I'm not sure we did.
No, because I haven't been on with you since the Vegas game.
Right. Number one, I think Blake and I were both really surprised to see him back in the lineup on the second of a back-to-back after that game and at his age. And he winds up playing more minutes than Tyler Myers and Carson Soucy as well. We were just sort of musing, Jeff, like, is Noah Juulsen a better option for them on the third pair right side as a natural righty with?
Well, and I was disappointed that nobody put the question to Rick Tocchet about, like, why Mark Friedman over Noah Juulsen. Somebody did ask about going with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, and Tocchet said, hey, like the energy that Friedman brought both on the ice and on the bench. And I don't know if this was just throwing, a loyal guy that has practiced a lot but hasn't played much, throwing him a bit of a bone. But I was surprised, like, if you're going to go with 7D, why wouldn't Noah Juulsen be that 7th defenseman? So that one was curious to me, and I'm with you. Like, lump me in that, when we started to see some surprises with the lineup at Mullet, one of them was Ian Cole is back in this lineup after being on the ice for the first 5 Vegas goals against. And, not to pin the one Arizona goal on Ian Cole, but guess what? He was out there for that one as well. So it has not been they only gave up one, and he was on the ice for the power play goal again. So it's been a tough road trip for him. He's 35 now, and I get the history of Rick Tocchet and Ian Cole from their time together in Pittsburgh and championships and those types of things. And that carries some significance. Don't get me wrong. But this felt like, the coaches talked about the idea of load management. This felt like an example to put it in place, especially after a tough night for a veteran guy 24 hours earlier. So, yeah, I didn't get the decision there. And let's be honest, Ian Cole's play has declined over the course of the season. Like, he was really good early, and it's a tough league. It gets younger every day. He's 35 now, and I do think that the speed of the game, his age, all of that plays in. There's still a role for Ian Cole on this hockey club. But, I asked the question on social as they lined up in Vegas, was that their best 6? And is that the way that you figured the Canucks would roll out their defense for game 1 of the playoffs, whoever they're playing against? And most people said, yes, it is. I don't know. As the penalty kill starts to take on a little bit of water here as well, like, that's an area that Noah Juulsen has been able to contribute all season long. And I do wonder if there's at least something to think about there. So I'm really curious to see how many of the final 6 games does Juulsen get into? Do they sit Cole down at any point here? Obviously, that'll be dependent on how healthy the other guys are around him. But, I was more than surprised to see Cole in the lineup against Arizona.
No, I think that's an interesting one as we count down the games here and get set for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Lastly, Jeff, I understand we have some news about Rink Wide coming up on Saturday. Pray tell.
Well, we rolled that out on the show last night. That's the final Rink Wide in the old era of podcast, strictly audio podcast only. We're getting with the times. Look what you guys have been doing here for a while now. This is the way the business is going, obviously. So we're adding a video component. We're going to stream it live starting on Saturday Night Live. And then from that point forward over the remaining regular season games and ramping this up, obviously, for the playoffs. So people have been asking about this for a while. When can we listen? How can we listen? How can we see? All those types of things. The time has come, and especially with the Canucks returning to the Stanley Cup playoffs, yes, it just felt like this was the time. So, we got a couple of games here ahead of game number 1 to iron out whatever kinks we have to iron out. But Farhan's going to be with me on Saturday, and we will go live a couple of minutes after the final buzzer and do what we do. And the show will still be put out as a podcast as yours is as well. So if people have their habits and routines, fear not. We are just branching out into the video world here and hoping that we can open a few more doors and a few more eyeballs as people get excited about
the immediacy
of the playoffs.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And handsome Farhan for the first go around on video.
RWV SNL.
Very much look forward to that. Jeff, thank you for this. We'll be listening and watching on Saturday, buddy.
Gotta
we'll catch
comb
up.
my hair now. Yeah. or go with a hat, I suppose.
Yeah. And we'll catch up next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.